Hello everyone, welcome back to our home libraries. For today's episode, we're going to be discussing A Court of Wings and Ruin by Sarah J. Maas, of course, and this is the third installment of the series that started with A Court of Thorns and Roses. And if you've been keeping up with this podcast, I mean, we pretty much publish these all in a row with like one episode break, so that should tell you something about how obsessed we are with these books. This might be the final one in this series from Feyre's perspective. The little snippet that she writes at the end in like the acknowledgement section made it seem like she was done writing in Feyre's perspective, though she did release a novella called A Court of Frost and Starlight that had lots of different perspectives, but it was pretty short and there was like zero plot in there, so we're not really going to discuss that in an episode at all. Anyways, we're going to ruin this book for you, so if this is something you want to read, make sure you leave before we get into the questions, and then come back once you have read it. And of course, head over to our Instagram, our Facebook, our YouTube. They are all our home libraries, plural, because we are two people.
So before I get into the summary for this one, A Court of Frost and Starlight, I would definitely equate that to like a holiday book, the feel of it. It's about like family and coming together, and it is pretty short, so if you're like a mood reader and you like to read stuff for the season, that would be a really good one to put in around the holiday season.
It takes place during the winter solstice for them, so it is very Christmassy for sure.
Yeah. But now to get on to the third installment, A Court of Wings and Ruin. This book picks up just a few weeks after the events that ended book 2. Mm-hmm. Thank, as they would say, the cauldron and the mother, we find out that Rhys and Feyre, their bond is still there. So now we know that Feyre is acting as a spy in the spring court with the intentions of getting some revenge of her own and destroying Tamlin's court from the inside out. While all this is happening, though, we still have war brewing. Hybern is gearing up. So now this book follows Feyre as she really tries to master her powers, working with Rhys and how their court functions, and dealing with all the other High Fae and the High Lords for the different courts to figure out if they can come together against this essentially common enemy, because Hybern is looking to just squash.
Yeah, take over everything.
Yeah, so, and to wield the power of something that it could essentially destroy everyone. So it's a big book. It's a big conclusion. And that...
Yeah, it's a thick one. It's a thick boy.
It is.
But in that, we can kind of get to our ratings and our review. I have to give this a slightly lower rating than Akamath, because that one is just like gold. Like, that is Sarah J. Maas's best book that I have ever read, but it doesn't say much because I've only ever read the Actor series. So yeah, I would have to give it, I'll give it 4.5 out of 5 cauldrons. We'll give it cauldrons this time.
I gave it 5 out of 5. Actually, cauldrons as well. I matched you on that. I'm sticking with it as 5 out of 5 because I'm just looking at the book as a whole. I think it was a really nice conclusion to this 3-parts trilogy. I think we wrapped up stuff and then also had some loose ends that get us excited for if we hopefully stay in this world. If I compare all 3 books, I'm 100% on board with you. The second book is incredible. Like, might be one of my top favorite. It's the slow
burn. It's the slow burn for me. Like,
it's just so
that
good.
Is it.
So good.
And Kayla and I were talking earlier today that there are rumors that Crescent City 3 is going to have a bit of a slow burn in there. So now we have to read that series.
Yeah, add it to the list. So
yeah, just one more to read.
Anyway, though, Sarah J. Maas didn't let us down. That's the...
Yeah, no, not at all. Not at all. Does she ever? I don't know. I guess we'll find out. The questions that we're discussing in this episode were... I kind of formulated them from talking points that I found, and this was in a blog called bookstacked.com, and I'll link that in the description. She does like a little overview and review of it, and then like has talking points for a potential book club, but I could not find set questions for this. But I mean, talking points are better than nothing. Anyway, the opening of this book, really great. We get this scene of Feyre, and she is painting roses. She's in the spring court again, and she's thinking about how, like, her persona, her demeanor as she is in the spring court is so calculated, and every stroke that she makes with the paint is calculated and meant to portray this, like, person who is healing from all of her quote-unquote trauma from the night court that she experienced, and also like a sunny disposition, which is how she started in this whole story. It's what Tamlin wants, or as we like to call him, Tampon.
It's Carrie's favorite
yeah,
like
I love that.
slur
I every
against Tamlin. Everywhere on the
every
internet
reel
people
that
use
I
that.
see.
And I laugh too.
I get a kick. It's great. But Lucien is suspicious of this, and we don't really find out what he really knows until later in the book. Maybe we'll get to it later. But the only person who really sees through this facade that she's got going on is Alice. And remember, in the first book, Alice was kind of like her handmaid, basically. So what kinds of things do you see Feyre doing to, like, slowly manipulate Tamlin's court and try to basically push his subjects into getting her revenge for her? What stuck out to you about her actions there?
I think the big thing is that everything that Feyre did was, like you said, small calculated things to essentially undermine Tamlin. It was to, like, show the people that he ruled that he doesn't care about them. He only cares about himself, which is kind of this issue that we've seen come out for Tamlin. The big thing also is that she's trying to undermine Ianthe, because Ianthe is kind of Tamlin's, like,
that bitch.
Me too. She's now become his, like, right-hand man, like, almost surpassing Lucien. Tamlin keeps listening to her more. So Feyre's weaving threads to show that Ianthe's questionable, but then also to push Tamlin to make stupid decisions to support Ianthe instead of supporting his men or fairies. She was smart. She was really smart.
Yeah, she was so smart, and it really, really stuck out to me about Ianthe, or
I say Ianthe because I listened to it on the audiobooks, and that was how they pronounced it.
I always heard it in my head as Ianthe. I don't know why, but Ianthe, whatever her name is, it doesn't matter because we don't care about her anyway. But anyway, it was really interesting to me how Feyre recognized that the little ceremonies she would perform were basically her manipulations. Like, she manipulated herself and others to make it seem like this ceremony was a super magical thing. And then when Feyre notices this, she then uses that against her and uses her powers to, like, move a rock. This was during was it summer solstice? It was, she, like, used her little wind powers to move the rock so that when the sun rose, instead of illuminating Ianthe, it illuminated her. And then everybody's like, oh my God, it's magic.
And, like, Feyre already had, like, some really good clout. I mean, she was the curse breaker, like, so to have more, like, she had this reputation built. So she just went with it. She was freaking smart.
Yeah.
Tamlin did not stand a chance. And she just took his own shortcomings and used it against him. It was genius.
Yeah, like his jealousy. Like that same night of the summer solstice, because she had been dancing with Tampon all day, and
I do want you to know that in my notes for this, I did refer to him as Tampon, like, for you.
Love that. She'd been dancing with him all day and, like, being all touchy and stuff. So she knew that he was going to come up to her room and, like, expect a little something. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And, like, she did have a nightmare. So, like, she was rattled, but then she used that to her advantage. And instead of going to Tampon to be like, I'm really upset, she went to Lucien's room. And then Tampon comes upstairs and sees them in an embrace because Lucien's trying to comfort her. And, you know, Tampon is a jealous bitch. Like,
I
She
felt
gets so
bad that
good.
I do feel bad though that she did that to Lucian, but also
Yeah, he's a good guy.
he is, but and I don't know what he could have done against Tamlin, but it kind of brings us to our next question where Tamlin started working with Hybern. And Lucian, I feel like,
Uh-huh.
should have kept, I mean, we don't know his perspective, but he should have kept trying harder to prevent that. But we see at the beginning that Tamlin now, because of working with Hybern and to get Feyre back, he lets some of Hybern's commanders into his court so that way they can
Mm-hmm.
scout the wall, um, to figure out like to help with their goal of bringing the wall down, with the use of the cauldron. What did you initially think of the two commanders that we were introduced to from Hybern, Prince Dagdan and Princess Baranaga?
Br- is that an Irish thing? Like, is it Branagh? Is there like a little flam in there at the end?
I
I don't
don't
know.
know. And could you tell that they were up to something other than trying to bring the wall down? We eventually find
Oh
out that
yeah.
they were
I
slowly
mean,
poisoning everyone.
they were weird. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
they're siblings, but it was like they had this like twin
Incestuous.
telepathy thing going on. It was really strange.
They slept together in the
And
same room together.
yeah, who
Although I
knows what's
guess,
happening there. Um, they were also kind of like sneaky. And even with their first dinner, like all of them together, Pharaoh was like reaching out with her little Damati powers, and she could feel that they were reaching out. So then she had to protect Lucian and Tampon. Like, who cares about Tampon? But at the same time, you don't want the King of Hybern through these two commanders to learn
any
literally
info.
everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. So now she's having to overexert herself to protect everyone at the Spring Court from their Damati powers,
Yeah.
which is just.
I will say I was kind of shocked. Obviously, we thought they were up to something, and I figured they were trying to get more information than just like the information at the wall. That was obviously important, but I figured they were trying to get other
Mm-hmm.
information. I did not anticipate, what did they call it, like fairy bane or something
Faebane,
like
I
that?
think is what it's
Fey
called.
bane.
Mm-hmm.
I did not anticipate there being like some sort of poison that could like stop people's power, which
Yeah.
I don't know why that didn't occur to me. So to have that happen and then have Feyre like her powers defenseless kind of shook
Yeah.
me. I wasn't
And
expecting that.
she had gotten so used to her powers and like really knew how to control them at this point that for them to just suddenly disappear, it was like
Yeah.
she didn't even know what to do. Like, she was so
Yeah,
used to having that.
and she had already like weakened her powers a lot by trying to protect everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And then to have that, it was just she didn't have her powers, so she had to
Yeah.
old school
So,
methods.
old school, yeah, for sure. The day that she finally decides she's going to pack up and leave the Spring Court, they're out on this other excursion. Like, a ton of people are out on this excursion to see something about the wall. Like, they're looking for weaknesses or whatever. But Lucian and Ianthe are also there. And of course, this bitch had Lucian tied up to a tree with shackles that were coated in Faebane. So it was like a special type of metal. So Lucian could do absolutely nothing. And Feyre overheard some pretty disgusting comments that Ianthe was making to Lucian. I mean, it's pretty obvious. We've seen through Rhys's memory that Ianthe is just like this power-hungry person, and she will try to sleep with anyone if that means she ends up with more power, or she has offspring with a lot of power, you know? So thinking about what Feyre did as a result of these comments and this huge intrusion of Ianthe on Lucian and Rhysand, because she's thinking about that too, basically used her Damati powers to make Ianthe smash her own hand with a rock, and then was like, forget that I had anything to do with this. Do you view these actions as a departure from her character to this point, or is this just more protective nature, Feyre?
I don't think that it's a departure from who she is. I think that we always have seen her do hard and questionable things to protect the people that she loves, it is more direct than other things that she has done.
Yeah.
She explicitly hurt this person.
This felt a little malicious.
Where, like, she did have a choice to, like, not hurt her. But I also feel as though she now has the mate bond fully intact. She loves Reese. This person has harmed him. I feel like that also, like, played a part in this need to, like, mess up her hands so much that she couldn't touch someone else like that again.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I'm back and forth about whether this is really a departure. I mean, it isn't the first time we've seen her be violent toward another person. I mean, she killed several of the Highburn soldiers when Reese was injured in book 2. But, like, that wasn't vindictive. That was like,
yeah,
I'm going to make sure Reese is okay. I'm going to rescue him, basically. Whereas this felt more like...
But that was the whole point of her being in the spring court, though, too.
Yeah, but I mean, I don't feel like she went there planning to murder anybody or, like, severely. Like, she just wanted to bring down the court. She wanted Tampon to have no one behind him. That's what she wanted.
I mean, that's, like... that might be worse than death for someone like Tamlin.
I don't know. I mean, I hate Ant, so, like, good for Feyre.
I don't feel bad for her. She had it coming.
She did. Yeah, I'll agree with that. Sure.
So after this, Lucien and Feyre escape. She kills the twins, the prince and princess from Highburn. Neither of them have their power, though, because the Faebane is still in them. So they can't winnow back to the Night Court. They end up having to try to, like, take a shortcut and walk across the Spring Court, through the Autumn Court, and just keep walking until their powers come back. The problem is that Autumn Court is where Lucien's from. He doesn't have a great relationship with his family, so this is a tricky spot to navigate as well. The whole time Feyre is trying to, like, shout down the bond at Reese, but her power still isn't working, so she can't even communicate down the bond. Finally, we have Cassian and Azriel show up. Carrie wrote this part. I'm going to actually read it off the paper, but she said, "Yay, the Bat Boys are back." So in case anyone doesn't follow this is what they're called, referred to on social media. But the majority of the rest of the book is spent preparing for this war against Highburn that we know is inevitably coming. One part of the preparation is meeting with all of the High Lords. And basically everyone agrees to come, except for Tamlin. He doesn't really, like, agree or disagree yet. And the location is going to be set at the Dawn Court. They figure that's kind of, like, the most neutral area. There's not a ton of, like, there are relationships among the courts, but they're all leery of one another. So what did we think of all the other High Lords that we got to meet?
So, I mean, I guess we could start with Baron. He's the High Lord of the Autumn Court. Lucien's
dad.
We think he's his father at this point. We'll see. He's
There's
rude. Just as bad as I expected him to be. But, like, all we really had at this point were interactions with Eris, who's, like, the oldest son. It kind of just feels like Baron did not want to be involved at all and doesn't care that there is a moral reason to prevent the King of Highburn from bringing down the wall. He's just kind of like, let it do what it does, and wants to be hands-off about the whole thing.
I think that Baron kind of reminds me more of, like, he's the person that's waiting for, like, something big to happen where there'll be, like, a vacuum for power and he wants to try to grab it. Yeah. Whereas I feel like all the other High Lords, we feel as though that they're very concerned about this war. They're, like, the only island standing between. So it's Highburn, their island, and then, like, the continent. So this is the only spot, the only thing that's really stopping from Highburn to get to the continent, to, like, keep mowing everything down. So inevitably, all these High Lords are nervous for their people, their lands, everything. Um,
What did you think about Callias? He was the High Lord of the Winter Court.
I feel bad because so he is very upset still and very mad at Rhysand because the Winter Court had a bunch of their young children, Fae, murdered under Amarantha's rule.
Yep.
I understand why he's upset with. I understand why he's upset. I think that it's misdirected at Rhysand, but I think that it'll take time for him to realize that Rhysand really did try to do everything he could to stop that. I just think that that's such a big wound that hesitancy between their interaction is just going to take a while. And I think that it really weighs on Rhys. It upsets him, obviously.
Oh, yeah, of course. I did really like his mate, Vivian was her name. She was like a great foil to Callias. Like, she was, where he was super reluctant, she was like, get over it. That was so good.
But I think that also, too, that's like the beauty of them showing what it was like being under the mountain and outside of the mountain. His mate had to like step up and do everything. And I feel like she, even though being under the mountain was horrific, she didn't have the luxury, not that anyone had a luxury at this point, to dwell on like shitty things. She just kept having to move to try to keep things together. So I feel like that's where her mindset's coming from. Whereas he was under the mountain for 50 years, just like stewing and distraught about this without having like the ability to act on anything. So I get the difference between their views on things. I obviously really like Tarquin. We met him previously.
Yep.
I just like adore him. I would love to see more of the Summer Court. And then Helion was awesome.
He was so funny. He's like so free, funny. Like does what he wants. Like he tries to get Az and Mor into a threesome with it, like all of them.
I think a
together.
Foursome.
And then he was even at one point like trying to proposition Feyre, and like when they're alone, Rhys is like, "Do you want to do that? Like, whatever you want to do is good." You know what I mean? That was really funny.
And but then you can tell he's a good friend to Rhys.
Yeah, and he was the Dawn Court High Lord. Helion was.
Yes.
So he's the one who has like healing powers, and they have this really big library. And
wait, was he Dawn? He's not Dawn.
He might be Day. The only other one was Thesan, and Dawn or Day, whichever one Helion wasn't, Thesan was. We just can't remember.
So, yeah, we meet everyone. We like most of them.
Yeah. The only one I hated was Baron. The others seem like they are open to conversation about this whole thing, and Baron's just like, screw you guys. But of course, Tamlin, he shows up, even though he didn't agree to attend. He can't resist the urge to trash talk Feyre after she destroyed his court, basically. He's disgusting, but we do get the iconic, like everybody on social media loves this little line from Asriel that's like, be careful how you speak about my high lady.
And this is a huge mic drop because I don't think anyone else realized that she was high lady yet.
Oh yeah, that is true.
So it's a really big deal. There's never been a high lady ever before.
Yeah, and then Vivian is like, I want to be high lady.
Yeah.
That was so, I love her. I want to read from her perspective.
And then, of course, Feyre can't, like, keep her chill. So she was trying to hide her powers, but she gets pissed off. So now everyone realizes that she has a little bit of everyone's power.
Yeah, and the result of this is that the meeting cannot conclude. Like, they still have a lot more that they need to talk about. Everybody decides that they are going to just stay in the Dawn Court overnight, okay? Feyre, after this conversation with Helion, is like putting some things together in her brain, and he looks a lot like Lucian and talks a lot like Lucian, and she's noticed that like they have similar skin color. Like Lucian has darker skin than any of his brothers, And he even admits to the fact that he had an affair with Lucian's mother around the time that Lucian would have been conceived. So what do we think about that? I mean, that kind of changes all the rules of inheritance, right? Like Lucian could become the High Lord of the Day Court if he's the only son.
Yeah, I think that this is just Sarah J. Maas being a genius and putting in something that could lead to another book. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Another book, another trilogy. I don't know. But yeah, I think that's what this sets it up for. And obviously we'd already like known like Lucian did not fit in at the Autumn Court where he was born.
Yeah. He's kind of also like ostracized by all of his brothers. Yeah.
He didn't really fit in at the Spring Court. He had a great relationship with Tamlin, so he made that his home. But I feel like you could like tell like something wasn't quite like the right fit. Now he's been staying at the Night Court because obviously he had a falling out with Tamlin. He's been at the Night Court. You can tell he doesn't really fit in there either. So I feel like this, it would make sense that then he would potentially fit in really well where maybe he was meant to be.
Yeah. Here's my theory though. I don't think Lucian will become High Lord of Day. I don't think Eris is going to become High Lord of Autumn. Okay, here's my hypothesis here. Feyre was given a drop of power directly from each High Lord of each court.
Yeah.
So my hypothesis is that when one of the High Lords dies, whoever that is, because they still have a drop of power in Feyre, the rest of their power is going to default there. So I think Feyre is going to get the power. And like in essence, she is partly each one of the High Lords. And maybe this is going to happen with Baron first, because we all know that Eris is pretty desperate to become High Lord of Autumn and is willing to conspire to kill his father to get there. But like the end of my little hypothesis here is that eventually they will unite all of the courts under Rhys and Feyre, because Feyre will literally have all the other courts' powers and Rhys will have the Night Court powers.
And Rhysand's the most powerful High Lord that's ever existed.
Oh yeah, they talk about his power all the time. Like at one point he says, sometimes I think about just wiping the whole world clean. Like he has that much power.
At the meeting, he literally silenced Tamlin. Like another High Lord was not able to withstand Rhysand's power. And I think it was a little gut check to everyone. They're like, don't mess with our boy Rhys, because he's got more than people remember.
I've said it before, I'm really good at guessing plots for movies. So maybe I've guessed a little bit of future plot, but also like Sarah J. Maas, if you happen to be listening to this, please don't take this away from me. Like if this is your plan, stick with it. Okay, don't change it because of me.
Do you think that potentially, because I'm going to take it a next step further, Rhys and Feyre are married, they're mates, likely that we will have a child at some point, maybe between them, right? Like that would be a likely thing. They talked about it. They're using contraception right now, but like that could be a thing. Do you think that the power could go to like their offspring?
Yeah, I think that eventually it'll be Feyre and Rhys, and it will become a kingdom again. And when one or both of them dies, all of that power will revert to their child.
To like their offspring.
And it'll continue to be like a kingdom until they come together and decide to split up the power again, which could happen because everyone knows when we forget about history, it tends to repeat itself. So.
All right. Well, we'll see what happens. We heard the prediction here first from Carrie,
yeah,
so we'll see.
Sure did. I have not seen that around anywhere else. That is all me. Maybe other people have thought of it, but like I said it before I saw it anywhere else.
There you go. I'm giving you the credit. So we can't talk about this book without talking about the war. There are a couple smaller battles that Hybern uses to essentially try to like dwindle down the Pranthian forces, tire them out. So Feyre decides she needs to do something about this. She needs to go see someone. So she tracks down the Suriel again for the third time.
Yeah. Our
And the
friend.
Suriel tells Feyre that the solution they need is on the second and pentalatum?
Penultimate. It means next to last, I think. The second and next to last, but
I
that
don't
was
know
his
where
word.
I just gave it those extra letters, but thank you, Carrie. Pages of the book. And also that she decides what breaks her. So she could go get that mirror that the bone carver had wanted that would drive other people insane.
She's been trying to get the bone carver involved, like wanting him to participate in this war because he's super powerful. He's like a death god, basically. And that was his price. You have to bring me the Ouroboros, which is this mirror that drives people crazy. Cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
But of course, freaking Anthe.
Dude, this bitch, she cannot say
she comes back. And she has someone shoot an ash arrow through the Suriel and kills the Suriel.
I was so sad.
That was my feelings too.
Yeah. Like, obviously there's a reason that he keeps letting Feyre capture him. Because, like...
Yeah. He's the first time, sure.
Yeah. The second time, it was like... What was it? A cloak that she... No, it wasn't. Yeah. I don't remember what it was the second time she trapped him. But, like, you can tell that he's, like, voluntarily letting her capture him. And then the third time, he finds her. Yeah. So, like, he wants to give her information. He wants her to succeed in what she wants to do. And, like, that bit right at the end, when he's, like, on his last breath, and he's, like, leave the world a better place than you found it. And that's just, like, proof enough that he's answering her questions because he believes that she can do something about the problems. Something that others cannot.
And, like, the Suriel, like, they're this, like, really scary, intimidating looking creature. Mm-hmm. And Feyre, like, didn't react to that and was kind and saved the Suriel in that one instance. So he, like, knew that she had this kindness to her. That's why he came back, because they formed this, like, kind of unlikely friendship or relationship. And it was this really sweet moment that fucking Ianthe.
Yeah. It turns out that Ianthe had been trying to track the Suriel as well, like, tried to find him, left a cloak out for him. And that cloak had a tracker in it, so when he took it, it was going to lead her right to Feyre. And that's what like really sucks about this whole thing, because the Suriel knew that tracker was there, and knew that if he stopped moving, Ianthe was going to find him. Yeah. And that's just really sad. It was a bummer. Yeah. But moving forward, we get this final battle scene. Nesta, it turns out, can kind of sense when the cauldron's power is going to be used. And at one point she yells for Cassian just before the squadron he's flying in is turned into dust by the cauldron. He's the only one that escapes. There's something going on. Like, there's something there with Nesta and Cassian. We've seen it time and time again. When she was put into the cauldron, he was, like, trying like hell to get for her, even though his wings were shredded. Yeah. And now, like, he left his entire squadron because she yelled his name. What do you think about this thing? What?
There's something there. There's something, like, tethering them. I don't know if it'll be, like, a mating bond. We've already seen that, obviously, with Rhys and Feyre. But, like, there's something there. I don't know if it's because she's, like, a maid. She's been made from the cauldron. And Cassian is, like, this super powerful Illyrian. I don't know if it's something about their powers that connects them or what, but there's something that tethers them together. And Nesta, like, actually cares about Cass, even though she, like, tries to act like she doesn't.
We get this whole scene because eventually Nesta wants to be bait for the King of Highburn, because not only can she sense the cauldron, but, like, the cauldron knows where she is too, because they have that connection because she took its power. And Cassian is like, I'm not going to let you go and face the King of Highburn all by yourself, right? And it's to the point where Cassian, again, is super injured, and Nesta is willing to throw herself over him and, like, die with him, essentially. And he says this really touching thing that's something like, I only have one regret in my life, and that's that I didn't have enough time with you. It was so cute. We were all like, no.
I know. This big strong Illyrian is like
I
being so
know.
tenderhearted. It was really sweet.
He is
And I
really
mean, this is an
tender-hearted.
example of, we see a lot of like sacrifice for this war. That incident right there was one of
Mm-hmm.
them. The bone carver actually does get involved in the war. He ends up dying.
Yeah.
We see eventually Feyre, Nesta, and Elaine's dad comes back. He comes with all these ships. He got human forces involved to try to stop Hybern. The King of Hybern uses their dad and to think that he could control Nesta, which of course he can't, and then just kills the dad.
Yeah.
Um,
And then there's also
and
Amryn. They do
yeah,
something. We find out that the second and penultimate pages in the book are not about winning the war, but they are about freeing Amryn from her Fey body. So we get to see her true form for the first time, which is basically like, I mean, it's described as an angel, basically, like winged, a lot of light, and she swoops through and kills everybody, basically. But in that, she depletes herself. So Amryn is gone. And then there's one more person who is going to sacrifice everything. And I was going to read that little bit in the book, but I didn't grab the book.
So after Amryn leaves her Fey body and destroys all the forces, it was so much power that it actually cracked the cauldron. So it wasn't able to hold that essence that's in there, and it starts like fracturing the earth, and they need to figure out how to get the cauldron back together to prevent like the entire world from being done.
Yes. So if you're following along, go ahead and open your Bibles to page 663. I saw that on Instagram. I had to say it. Sorry.
So funny.
I'm sorry if that was sacrilegious. My bad. I apologize. Anyways, page 663. Feyre says, I don't know what to do. Rhys studied the ruins. Amryn said you were a conduit. I nodded. So be one again. What? He looked at me like I was the insane one as he said, remake the cauldron, forge it anew. With what power? My own. So, skipping forward a little bit, Rhys's power flowed through me, out of me. The cauldron appeared. Light danced along the fissures where the broken thirds had come together. That's where I needed to forge. I put a hand against the side of the cauldron, raw, brutal power cascading out of me. I leaned back into him, unafraid of that power, of the male who held me. It flowed and flowed, a burst dam of night. The cracks fizzled and blurred. The void began to slither back in. We needed more, and he gave it to me. Rhys handed over everything. I was a bearer, a vessel, a link. I love you, he whispered into my mind. The first crack healed, then the second. I felt him trembling behind me, heard his wet rasp of breath. I tried to turn. I love you, he said again. The third and final crack began to heal over. His power began to sputter, but it kept flowing. I threw mine into it. Together we threw everything in. We gave every last drop. It took me a moment to grasp it, what I saw. Rhys was sprawled on the rocky ground, wings draped behind him. He looked like he was sleeping, but as I breathed in, it wasn't there. That thing that rose and fell with each breath, that echoed each heartbeat, the mating bond, it wasn't there, and Rhys was dead. So, did you cry? That's the question.
No, because I just like knew she wouldn't do that to us. Like I knew that wasn't the end.
See, here's the thing. I knew it was coming. We all know this is the second time I've read this. I still freaking cried. And it wasn't really about Rhys's death. It was more like Feyre's reaction to his death that got me. Like my heart was all clenched in my chest.
I mean, it's definitely an intense scene, and Sarah J. Maas did a really good job writing it, but I just knew, I don't know, I'm going to mess up the quote, but did you ever watch Veronica Mars when Logan and her say that they have like once in a lifetime, earth shattering, lives ruined type of love? And I feel like that's Feyre and Rhys, like they're beyond that. There's no way that was going to be the end for them. So. Meant to be.
So they do end up bringing Rhys back to life, the same way that they did with Feyre. Each High Lord gives a little drop of power. They don't really give him any extra powers. It just like gives life back to him, I guess. And I kind of think that this is where Sarah is working toward a redemption arc for Tamlin, because of course they need Tamlin's power. And Tamlin's been so back and forth this whole book. Like, we don't know what side he's fighting on. One second he's with the good people, the next second he's with Hybern, the next second he's saving Feyre, the next second, like, what is up with him? Anyway, he's the last one left that has to give a kernel of power for Rhys to be resurrected. And she was literally begging him. Like, she was saying, I will do literally anything if you will save Rhys. And only thing Tamlin said was, be happy. So that's redemption arc. I don't know. Let us know on our Instagram if you think Tampon should get a redemption arc.
So overall, what do we think of the conclusion for the trilogy? I thought it was good.
Yeah, I think it was hopeful. I think that
I do feel like the cauldron breaking and then like solving it that quickly, to me, like felt like, I was like, how do they just like know that answer right away? That's like my
because Rhys is 500 years old. More than that, because he fought in the war 500 years ago. He knows things. He's very intelligent.
Yeah, but the cauldron is just like so old. Like, they didn't have any information about how to like stop the cauldron. So like, how do they know to put it back together? That was my only, and like giving him their power felt a little, we already done that, but I didn't hate it by any means. That was my only complaint, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it makes it feels like the characters they'll be able to make something good out of all these awful events, even if it takes a little bit of time to heal. I mean, Elaine is actually the one that made the initial blow for the King of Hybern to die, and then Nesta finished him off. And you would never expect Elaine to be mentally capable of
not where she was at that book. Yeah,
stabbing someone.
So what do we think the next book is, from Nesta's perspective? Where do we think that they're going to take this? Things as this was kind of a conclusion for a trilogy. What do we think is the next steps? I did not read the back of the book when I answered this, so I have since started reading it. But this is what I said. I think that Nesta still has these powers that we saw like her not really be able to use during this battle. So I feel like she's going to start doing some sort of training to like figure out her powers. And we still have those queens to deal with. They never showed up for this battle. So I feel like that's the next part, is Nesta versus these queens, because the one queen is pissed at Nesta.
Yeah, and we have the wall is shattered. It doesn't exist anymore. And, you know, that kind of means that there are mortal people to be conquested for those who think that that's what should be done. And we also have that vacuum of power, because now the King of Hybern is dead. What's interesting is we never know his name. Like, he's always referred to as the King of Hybern.
They called him Hybern, so I feel like that's his name, and then he named his land after himself. They literally call him Hybern.
How egotistical can you be? But anyway, his whole island, like, who knows what's going to happen there? Now there's no king there. Who knows who's going to pick that up?
Yeah.
But anyway, in our next episode, we're going to be discussing one of Kayla's favorites. She rereads this apparently every single year. It is A Long Way from Chicago, and then the sequel, which is A Year Down Yonder, and they are by Richard Peck. This is a middle grades book, right? Middle grades?
Yeah. They're like really quick, easy reads. So if you have any like young ones in your life, this might be something fun to read together. It's really cute.
I've never read it, so I guess we will see.
It'll be interesting to see if you like them or if I just still like them because I read them when I was young.
Yeah, things can be like that. You know, like, you have nostalgia about them, and that kind of keeps them in your heart, whereas, like, I've never even read a word of these books. I've read the titles, that's it.
We'll see what happens. It should be a fun one. So, everyone, thank you for coming on this journey with us for the first 3 parts of A Court of Thorn and Roses. Did I say that right?
Yeah.
It felt weird for a second. Maybe it's weird because it's done. But we will be back with Silver Flame.
Yeah, later this year.
So we're not leaving this world just yet. So hopefully,
and you know, we got to read Crescent City now. Now that we got
we just
slow
got to
burn
figure
in
out
3, we
when.
got to pick the other 2 up.
Absolutely. But thank you again. Leave us a comment. With this one, I think maybe just throw up a fairy again. It's all about the fairies.
Yeah.
So
Or you know what? Surprise us.
whatever
Go
you
explore
want.
in your emojis and surprise us.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning in, and we'll get with you guys next time.
Yep. Bye.
Bye.